Hey everyone, hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Shelly and today we are going to be doing something really fun. We're going to be talking about the long list, the Women's Prize for Fiction long list in 2022, which was announced this morning. Now in the United States, it was announced at 4:30 this morning. I did not wake up at 4:30 to look at the results, but I did get up about 5:10 at 5:10 in the morning, and I looked through their long list because I recently, like a couple of days ago, put out a predictions video for the long list for the Women's Prize for Fiction. I had a strategy. I'll discuss whether my strategy was any good or not. My strategy was this, and I'll leave the link to my video, to Sunday's video down below, because I really went into a bit of detail as to my thought process behind creating my long list. But I was looking for starred reviews. So what happens is that when a reviewer works for a publishing house, they have an option to give a star to a book or not. And if a book has a star, it means that it's a really good book. So I was looking for multiple starred reviews from multiple reviewing houses like Booklist, Kirkus, Steve Donahue, who is a book critic here on BookTube, Library Journal, Publishers Weekly, and I think I'm missing one, but I'm sure it will come up in just a minute. And so I was looking for books that had a lot of starred reviews. That was my strategy. And it didn't work out super well. And I will tell you why, because I feel kind of like duped. I was feeling really good about my predictions list, like a little too good. And so I was brought to my knees. I was brought down to ground level. I was humbled because out of the 16 books on the long list for the Women's Prize for Fiction, much to my chagrin, 6 of those books weren't even professionally reviewed, at least in the big journals. And so 6 of the books automatically I would have never guessed because they didn't show up as professionally reviewed at all. One book is a forthcoming book, so it will be out in 10 days from now. So we might see professional reviews for that book pop up. But let's talk quickly about the 6 books that didn't even get professionally reviewed, so I had no idea were even contesters. I had no idea they could even be on the long list for fiction. Before we get into the video, getting this in really quick, this seems to be a habit of mine, so I'm sorry, but I want to know, have you read any of these books off the long list, and would you stand behind them as a recommendation? If you haven't read any, do you want to read any? I'd be really curious to know if any of these books are on your list to read before the announcement or after, or has the announcement of this long list really piqued your interest with some of these reads, and are you going to be moving them on your list to read? Are they getting bumped up because they made the long list for the Women's Prize for Fiction? So I'm really curious about where these books stand with you and your reading journey, and I would love for you to share that down below. Okay, back to the video. The first book that didn't pop up in any of my searches was called Careless by Kirsty. I like the cover, but this is what it's about. So it says, sometimes it's easy to fall between the cracks. At 3:04 p.m. on a hot, sticky June day, Bess finds out she's pregnant. She could tell her social worker, Henry, but he's useless. She should tell her foster mother, Lisa, but she won't understand. She ought to tell Boy, which is capitalized boy, but she hasn't spoken to him in weeks. Bess knows more than anyone that love doesn't come without conditions, but this isn't a love story. Not super interested in that, mostly because I'm not super interested in heartbroken-y love stories, but we'll see. We will follow the career of this book with a little bit of interest. The second book that wasn't professionally reviewed is This One Sky Day by Leon Ross. And the description actually really caught my interest because it sounds like a magical realist or a high fantasy book. And last year, Piranesi by Susanna Clark won, and that was also a high fantasy book. So I'm wondering if this will bode well. A little bit of spice to mix up some of the maybe contemporary fiction we might see in a long list like this. So this is the description of Ross's book. Dawn breaks across the islands of Popicho, a world where magic is everywhere. Food is fate, politics are broken, and love awaits. Everyone in Popicho was born with a little something, The local name for it was Coors. Magic, but more than magic. A gift? Nah. Yes, from the gods, a thing that felt so inexpressibly your own. And then it goes on to say, like, you know, there's going to be unforgettable characters and an adventure ensues. So this sounds really interesting, and it sounds a bit different than maybe some of the other titles on the list. 4 of the books that were not professionally reviewed, I would actually think of them as rather obscure reads, because as I was looking them up to figure out any information on them, there are less than 200 ratings on Goodreads for each of these books, these next 4 books, and they are reviewed, like there are written reviews, even on Goodreads, less than 30 times, less than 30 written reviews about the next 4 books. The next book is The Bread the Devil Knead. I kind of want to say needed, need? The Bread the Devil Knead. Tell me if I'm getting that wrong. Okay, this is by Lisa Allen-Agostini. This is an engrossing and atmospheric novel with a strong feminist message at the heart of its page-turning plot. It explores an abusive love affair with searing honesty and skillfully tackles the issue of gender violence and racism against the lush and heady backdrop of a national festival and music that feeds it. This sounds really cool. The setting sounds really fun. Not quite sure this is for me. This was only rated 137 times on Goodreads and reviewed 22 times. All right, another really low rated book, at least on Goodreads, is called Salt Lick by Lulu, Allison, and this actually quite piqued my interest. Food production has moved overseas. The countryside is empty and once again wild. The rural economy has collapsed and people have no choice but to move to cities. The population drifts away, towns and villages are abandoned. It isn't dystopian, but it is further down the road. And then it introduces you to our main character, Jessie, who is 8. And then the last paragraph really kind of piqued my interest with this particular book, Salt Lick, which, by the way, isn't that just a fantastic name? Okay, so it says, the book has a chorus, the dreamy herd voice of feral cows who are impatient with humans for their cruelty and lack of ability to find contentment, but they watch over Jessie and then the other characters. I really love this idea of these feral cows getting a voice. I'm not sure if that's how the novel plays out, but that little sentence, like this chorus of voices that are feral cows, I was like, yes, please, sign me up. I know that's kind of weird, but I was like, yes, please sign me up. Next book, The Exhibitionist by Charlotte Mendelson. This was rated 16 times on Goodreads. I mean, this is like so obscure to me. So it was rated 16 times on Goodreads and it was reviewed 16 times. Let's see what The Exhibitionist is about with all of its 16 reviews and ratings. So it says, the longer the marriage, the harder the truth becomes. That is quite ominous. So it says, meet the Hanranen family gathering for a momentous weekend as famous artist and notorious egoist Ray Hanran prepares for a new exhibition of his art, the first in many decades, and one he is sure will burnish his reputation forever. So this says that it's going to explore the themes of art, sacrifice, toxic family politics, queer desire, and personal freedom. I love the themes, but I'm not sure if this is the book that I will read if it comes to art. I really wanted to read Second Place by Rachel Cusk, which was on my predictions list, but didn't make it on the long list. The final book that was definitely not professionally reviewed and only had 11 ratings on Goodreads and 8 reviews is Flamingo by Rachel Elliott. And it has to do with flamingos and what they are a signal of, but it seems like what this book is really about, and I'll read the bottom, it's a celebration of kindness, of tenderness, set in 2018 and the 80s, which really piques my interest. It's a song for the brokenhearted and the big-hearted, and is ultimately a novel grown from gratitude and a book full of wild hope. I don't really know, this sounds like a good book, like a sweet book, but it doesn't seem like one I would necessarily pick up. We're now going to get into the books that were professionally reviewed, but that weren't on my list. In the first one, and we're going to try and maybe figure out why I didn't add them to my list. So the first one is The Paper Palace by Miranda Cowley Heller. And this is what it says, the blurb. While staying at the Paper Palace, the family summer place she has visited every summer in her life, 50-year-old Elle must decide between the life she has built with her husband and the life she always imagined she would have had with her childhood love. So it's kind of like split, a moment in time where a woman gets to make a choice. This is Reese Witherspoon's book club pick. This was reviewed 4 times professionally, but was never starred, so it never got quite the thumbs up from a professional book reviewer. The next book I actually have coming to me from my library. I'm not sure I will read it, but the synopsis sounded good. So it's called Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason. This received star reviews from Booklist and Publishers Weekly. So my goal was to get 3 star reviewed from 3 separate places. So this only got 2, which is probably why I passed it up. And it says, pushing away her devoted husband, a once successful writer moves back into her bohemian childhood home where she struggles to come to terms with the mental illness that has overshadowed her life. What I loved about it is that the words that were describing this book was witty, engaging, and candid, which sounds like right up my alley. I don't know, it sounds really good. Giving you all a little whiplash now because we're going from witty and engaging to bleak and atmospheric with Creatures of Passage by Maroa Yaide, I think. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. And this is about, this is going to explore the forgotten quadrant of Washington, D.C. and the ghosts that haunt it, which would be actually quite cool if it has some elements of mystery. But it says that this is bleak, haunting, and atmospheric, as I mentioned, and it received star reviews from Library Journal and Kirkus. Remote Sympathy by Catherine Chidgey is our next novel, and it got mixed reviews. So it was reviewed by Publishers Weekly, Kirkus, and Booklist, but was only starred by Publishers Weekly, which is probably why it didn't make my list. I tried to avoid books with mixed reviews. So this is about the wife of an SS officer, Frau Hahn, is oblivious to the fact that a concentration camp is on the fringe of their idyllic life until she is forced into an unlikely and poignant alliance with one of Buchwald's prisoners who challenges her naive ignorance. So a historical fiction novel for all of you historical fiction lovers out there. The next book is by British-Turkish author Elrif Shafak. I'm so sorry, and it's called The Island of Missing Trees. This novel plays on the themes of belonging and identity, love and trauma, nature and renewal, and it sounds beautiful. It sounds beautiful. I don't know much about this author, but apparently she was shortlisted for the Booker some years ago. I forgot to mention this book had starred reviews from Booklist and Publishers Weekly. The next book I'm really excited about because it's one that I hadn't heard of and it sounds really good. I have it in front of me. It doesn't mean that I will read it. It just means that my library had it available to me. And it is the final revival of Opal and Nev by Donnie Walton. And this is what, here, I'm gonna actually set the book down. This is what the final revival is about. So accepting a contract from a fledgling record company, a talented music artist in early 1970s New York ensures racist responses to her activism before a reunion interview decades later reveals explosive secrets. So this was starred by Publishers Weekly, Booklist, and Library Journal, and my library had it. So very excited about that. The following book I'm calling my missed opportunity book because I did have it on my list and then I took it off my list at the last second. What in the world? Okay, and it is the Book of Form and words. It is called The Book of Form and Emptiness by Ruth Ezeki. And this is what the Book of Form and Emptiness is about. 13-year-old Benny O starts to hear voices after the death of his musician father. The voices belong to the things in his house, such as a sneaker, a broken Christmas ornament, a piece of wilted lettuce. At first, Benny tries to ignore them, but as soon as the voices drive him to seek sanctuary in the silence of a large public library where objects are quieter, there, Benny encounters a homeless philosopher poet who encourages him to ask important questions and find his own voice amongst the many. And he finds his very own book. who narrates Benny's life and teaches him to listen to the things that are important. Steve Donahue noted this book as having more heft than this author has previously ever written. I have not read anything by Ruth Ozeki, so maybe I took her off the list because I haven't particularly read anything by her, but this sounds really interesting, and I wouldn't be surprised if I perhaps picked it up. This again is one of those books that had mixed reviews. So it was reviewed but not starred by Publishers Weekly and Kirkus, and I believe it had a starred review from a reviewing source. I just didn't note it here in my notes right now. Okay, now we're getting to the books that I actually was right about, okay? So the first one is Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead. Oh gosh, my glare is just awful. And as I mentioned, this is a dual narrative. There is 2 timelines that are interwoven in order to tell a bigger story, and one of them is about an actress, and she's playing an aviator from the 1950s, a female aviator from the 1950s, and it seems like we also follow that aviator's life. So we're following the actress that's playing the aviator and the aviator's life. So Maggie Shipstead's Great Circle. The Sentence by Louise Erdrich also made it, which is the one that had dark things. So this has dark humor. It's set in a bookstore and things ensue. I've heard mixed reviews about Erdrich's book, The Sentence, but Steve and a bunch of people said it was great. So I would love to get to this soon, whenever soon is. Gosh, y'all. Who knows when soon is. And then the final book that I guessed correctly is Build Your House Around My Body by Violet Coopersmith. And if you all go back to that video, I said, I don't know if I want to read this because Booklist mentioned that it is for patient and observant readers, and those readers will be richly rewarded. And I'm already going through some like longer books right now. I recently finished Hilary Mantel's The Mirror and the Light, which was over 700 pages. I read Gone with the Wind, which it's not a slow-paced book, but it is a long book, and that it was like 1,400 pages. And then right now I'm reading War and Peace, and so anything that's like slower paced or longer, I'm feeling a little bit slightly hesitant to pick up, but there are some really great sounding books on this list. I haven't read any. And then let me just tell you really quickly, sorry if I'm having some awkward transitions over here. I'm not trying to. So after I posted my predictions video, I got a couple of comments about 2 books. The first one is The Liar's Dictionary by Eli Williams, and the other one was The Net for Small Fishes by Lucy Django. So I was informed by a lot of people that those books were actually published before the cutoff date in the UK. So when I was searching and I put in a limit for my dates, it seemed to favor US publication dates. And so those 2 books didn't even make the qualification. So I'm gonna have to add that into my searching to double check UK release dates versus US release dates. So that was very, very helpful. 2 books that I'm absolutely shocked didn't make the list. The first one is Matrix by Lauren Groff. I don't know why. I just thought this had a shoo-in. It was so highly reviewed. It's getting a lot of high praise here on BookTube. I thought this would appeal to a lot of readers. I'm sure it makes the 30,000 word count. Surely it does. I hope it didn't get disqualified because of the word count. So Lauren Groff's Matrix didn't make it, and the other one that I was shocked didn't make it was Harrow by Joy Williams. I think that this is actually a book that I will probably either buy or check out because I was so invested in this making the long list in some way, shape, or form, and it didn't even, there's no mention of it, so I wonder what happened to Harrow by Joy Williams. And then the last prediction that I did get right, though I kind of threw it in at the end, and I'm doing the same here, and that is Sally Rooney. Sally Rooney did not make it on the long list. Yay! I'm sorry for those of you who love her writing, and some of you were concerned that I didn't like her. I think she is a solid writer, but the accolades to her name, I just don't understand, and I don't stand behind. So that's kind of where that comment came about. I don't find her incredibly talented like some of you do. Anyways, I am gonna go, leaving it on a bit of a sour note. I'm excited about these. Let me know if you're gonna read any of these. Let me know if you're interested or have read any of these. Were there any surprises on the long list? Oh my goodness, I just wanna know, I wanna know. So that's it for me. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in my next one. Bye guys.